Hi, this is Riaz from Networks Learning. Welcome to Cisco's Next Generation Firewall NGFW 5-Path Threat Defense Training. In this video, we will look into uh, Next Generation Firewall Security Intelligence. What are the security intelligence features and how you can configure with security intelligence features in your environment in order to protect from malicious sources, malicious IP addresses, and malicious DNS over the internet. So basically, security intelligence is incorporated, and it's an integrated policy with access control policy. Inside the access control policy, you have a separate tab for security intelligence where you can configure multiple features which are required to secure your network. So let me show you the topology. This is our topology on which we were previously working in. We have performed multiple labs on this topology. I have one firewall and a client machine and edge router, and over the then traffic passes to the ISP over to the internet. Let me show you the access control policies and security intelligence tabs inside the FTD. I am managing the FTD from my FMC center. Now taking you to the access control policy. There is my access control policy. Inside the access control policy, rules, we have a rule tab for rules, and we have a tab for security intelligence. Inside security intelligence, we have multiple items and multiple things that needs to be considered when you are securing your network. So we will take a look at how we can utilize these features which are built in and which are frequently updated from Cisco's cloud feed resource called the Talos, and from there you can from there the feeds are injected into the FTD, and these feeds these feeds in the form of these objects and in the form of these object groups, you can utilize them in your network in order to block certain traffic based on their risk level, based on their categories, based on their attack level. So all this comes into the security intelligence tab. So basically, security intelligence engine, specifically FTD engine, designed to quickly drop certain traffic based on known malicious sources. If traffic comes to the FTD and FTD detects that the source of the source is a malicious IP address or a malicious URL, or if traffic is transversing or is destined for a domain which is malicious domain as identified by Talos, it can be quickly dropped without any further processing. So separate security intelligence strategies and their control is provided in order to have a granular control over different types of attack strategies. Means when we have a single IP address, we can either block a single IP address, or might be there would be multiple web servers or applications being hosted on a single IP address. If we block the IP address, we may block some kind of good traffic that is not a malicious traffic, but when there are multiple servers, multiple applications residing behind an IP address, in that case we have multiple controlling methodologies in terms of IP address, in terms of URL, in terms of domain, so that we can control the attacks or control the risk level by using different strategies. So that's why we have different strategies for security intelligence in terms of IP address, in terms of URLs, in terms of domains. So how these lists, or how these data is collected, and how this FTD knows that these networks are malicious, these networks are blacklisted or whitelisted. So here comes the Cisco's cloud security intelligence platform, which is called the Talos. So actually Talos does? Talos is a centralized, intelligence cloud mechanism which collects data worldwide. It has the information about zero-day reports, zero-day attacks, vulnerabilities, and malicious IP addresses, malicious URLs, malicious domains, and any all kinds of information which are being replicated worldwide in terms of security intelligence. They are pushed by Telos, the security intelligence of the Cisco, to the FTDs. The FTD regularly gets updates from Cisco Telos for such kind of malicious traffic, spams, malwares, or any kind of zero-day attack. So these feeds are injected, or these feeds are pushed to the Cisco's security devices worldwide, and though these devices then deploy those IP addresses, those malicious URLs, DNS into their security policies, and ultimately protect the network from attacks and from any kind of malicious activity. So feeds, there are multiple types of feeds that can be utilized inside the FTD. Cloud-based service by Cisco, which I showed you over here, is the Talos, and we can also configure manual lists containing different kinds of security parameters that we want to allow, we want to block, we want to add the entries into blacklist or whitelist. That's how you can configure multiple types of feeds, manual feeds or auto feeds. So here we have a tab in objects and object management. We have a security intelligence tab. Under security intelligence we have DNS lists and feeds. DNS list means it contains the DNS entries for blacklisted or whitelisted. You can put your own list by creating in the form of a text file and import it into this feed, DNS feed list, so that they can be utilized in a security intelligence feature of the access control policy. So this is the Cisco DNS and URL intelligence feed, last updated. This date is showing over here. Let me show you. You can update and you can update and configure the update frequency over here. I have the update frequency of 2 hours. Every 2 hours it will be updated. So this is how you get the DNS and URL intelligence feeds. Another one, we have global block list for DNS. So it's also a manual, and it can be fetched from Telos as well. Global do not block list for DNS. It contains the valid legitimate DNS entries that should not be blocked, and it will be in whitelist. Then we have network list and feeds. Cisco intelligence feed, Cisco TID feed, global block list, global do not block list. Then we have URL list and feeds. Global block list for the URLs. It contains the URLs that needs to be blocked globally, and global do not block list. Every type of feed is being fetched from the Telos. At the same time, we can also configure manual list. Manual list contains static IPs, URLs, domains, or blacklist or whitelist. IPs. Logs packets as blacklisted without dropping them. Analysis purpose, manual list. Static IPs, URLs, domains to blacklist or whitelist. We can add static IPs, URLs, domains to the blacklist or the whitelist. You know the things which I showed you previously here at access control. We have security intelligence. Here, do not block list. This is called a whitelist. Okay. Here we have networks block list. This is called the blacklist. Block list and blacklist. You can add any kind of IP that you think is not a legitimate, or it's not a good IP, and you can add over here and check either FTD is blocking or not. We will test this mechanism by configuring a blacklist IP on our network, and we will initiate the traffic from our inside zone and will test the results on FTD. So these are the feeds that FTD gets from Cisco Cloud Intelligence. You can also add your own objects that you think are malicious, and you can put them into blacklist or whitelist as well. So what are the responses? You can have response to these blacklist and blacklist or whitelist URLs and networks. Here we have added this global block list that comes from the telos with 0 objects. Then we have global do not block list. Then we have URL attackers. It contains the attackers URLs. Then we have URL banking frauds that contain banking fraud URLs that should be blocked. So you can add a list, an IP address, a subnet, a pool to a do not block list or to a block list. Alternatively, you can also say that a block list means a blacklist, do not block list means a whitelist. So these are the terminologies that you can use accordingly. So at the same time, in connection events, when you see analysis, connection and events, at this stage you can also specify an IP address to be added to a block list or to be added to a do not block list. So let me click on this 10.12.1.100. I can add IP to block list and add IP to do not block list. So these are some of the actions that you can perform quickly on an IP address when you see any kind of activity on an IP address. So looking IP, glass, record, feature IP, telos IP, threat grid IP, threat response IP, umbrella, virus, total IP. So entire features can also be configured for an IP address on these connection events. So going back to my policies and security intelligence. We have security intelligence for IPs and URLs as well. So for IPs and URLs, we have multiple, these are the IPs and these are the URLs. We can have a dynamic blacklisting. Dynamic blacklisting is updated from the telos, that the section which I showed you in the object management section. Update timer duration can also be set. When we can get update the access control policy, when our dynamic blacklisting update feeds are updated from the Cisco cloud, that will appear over here. The networks will appear over here, URLs will be appearing over here. So you can add them, you can remove them, either to be added to the block list, or either to be added to the do not block list. So it's up to you. Multiple conditions can also be set based on zones under your security intelligence rules. These are the networks and these are the rules. You can also set your own objects, for networks as well as for URLs, with the help of a text file with a single line entries, and you can upload that list into the object managements. Then we have security intelligence, I think so, yeah, security intelligence. DNS list can also be uploaded over here. Network list and feeds can also be uploaded over here. URL list and feeds can also be uploaded over here. Basically, all these lists are updated from Cisco. However, you can also build your own lists and upload them and use them over here at access control policy and security intelligence. That will be appearing over here, and you can use them according to your requirement in the network. Then we have under security intelligence, we have networks, we have URLs. Then we have networks who specifically work on IP addresses, URLs work on URLs. And then comes the DNS policy. Here is the default DNS policy. When we want to edit it, you click on it, the pencil section, and you will be moved into the default DNS policy. Policies, you can directly go to policies, and under policy section you have access control, intrusion, malware, and DNS. And we are currently discussing the DNS policy. In DNS policies, you have two entries, two rules. One is do not block list. Do not block list means the whitelist. Okay. Block list means the blacklist, global block list for DNS. These are the two rules. Under these rules, you can configure your own rules and linking them to the DNS entry, which could be a manual entry, which could be a dynamic entry, dynamically learned from the Cisco. So in the lab section, I will explain you how you can configure DNS policy, and we will test it by making a DNS entry on a remote router, and we will access it, and at FTD we will consider it as a blacklist, and will block the DNS query over the network. So this is how you can configure security intelligence for DNS, for IP addresses, for URLs. Further, we can also have multiple other policies that you can configure. Previously we discussed about access control policy, pre-filter policy, and here we have discussed the security intelligence, including DNS, including URL, and including IP addresses or networks. So this is how you can configure security intelligence in the network. This was the overview. However, we will configure one by one. We will configure security intelligence based on our one of the network, one of the router. We will blacklist it over here and will test the response. We will whitelist the we can also whitelist that and test as well, and we will also configure a DNS policy for our to be used on over network, and we will verify it how you can configure DNS policy, how you can configure blacklist or whitelist in the network. So in the next video I will be showing you the security intelligence demonstration in the network. Thanks for watching my videos.